She was a person of great perseverance. Um, not really what you'd call stubbornness, not that, but if she felt something would be worth doing, if she felt it was a principle or a goal worth holding to, then she held to it, and almost always she got to it. Occasionally, things didn't work out that way, but one way or another, she was not to be diverted by ordinary problems. For example, one of the funniest and I think most indicative ones pertaining to this house is the columns on the front porch, because originally the house had a frame porch, and the columns were actually slender posts. Well, Mother decided, and Daddy agreed, he didn't particularly care, she decided that the house ought to have tall white columns. Well, down here on 4th and, I don't know, Guadalupe, Colorado, anyway, just south of Covert Buick, between Covert Buick Company on 4th Street and the river, was a large, impressive old home of the Swisher family. But it had gone to rack and ruin. It had been vacant many years and was steadily deteriorating. But it had been a handsome house, and it had columns. So when Mother decided we had to have columns here, she and Daddy went to whoever owned the place at the time and talked about the columns and said they didn't want the rest of the house, but just the columns to bring here. Well, the agreement was made and a price was named, but the people did not ask for payment. In those days, a man's word was his bond, and a promise was a promise, and it was kept. Mm-hmm. And so they made the agreement, and Daddy said they would get the front ready here, and then they would let them know, and they would move the columns, and that was fine. Well, in the meantime, while they were working on the front porch here to get it ready, Dr. Z.T. Scott arrived in town, and he decided he liked the whole house. Not just the columns, but the whole house, and he bought the whole thing and moved it out here on the lake, and that's Sweetbrush. Yes. Of course, there were changes made, but those columns on Sweetbrush are the ones we thought were going to come here. Well, Mother, being of her nature, was greatly distressed and angry, clear through. She said the people, referring to the owners of the house, and I don't remember who they were, but she said those people promised us and they went back on their word. Well, Daddy was somewhat quieter in nature and always philosophical, because that was the only way he knew how to live life. And he said, well, they really did. They certainly did go back on us, but sometimes that happens. It's bad, but it does happen. And we've lived this long without columns. We can go on living the rest of our days without columns. Mother said, no, we're going to have columns. So she and the contractor went up the river here. In those days, it was not built up past Deep Eddy. And somewhere up the river, they found, well, there were a great many of them in those days. They found 6 enormous cypress trees. A really great big one, straight as could be. And from the property owner, they bought these 6 cypress trees and chopped off all the limbs, and then hauled them in here. I remember very well when that was done. And I just wish, I don't know why we didn't take pictures, because that was a really major undertaking, hauling those 6 cypress trees in here, Well, anyway, they were put up where the columns are and embedded in cement. And then they were bricked around and around and around, the brick being laid as a brick wall would be with mortar, about 2 circles of bricks. And then the outside of the brick circle was mortared and plastered over, and then stucco was on that top of that, and then they were painted, and so those are Mother's columns. They don't look like Corinthian or Ionian or any of those other classic designs, but I have been told by architects that structurally they are stronger than any of the very beautiful wooden columns. Well, anyway, Mother was satisfied, and so that just shows that she did have an ability when one road closed to find another and open it up.